Albert Scharenberg from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, who's now in Berlin, but will go to New York in the next 4 months to head up the Institute's work in New York, the Foundation's work in New York. He has written many books and articles on the American left, in particular the civil rights and African American struggles.
So I hope I can say something about the European left, some points that are relevant to our discussion, and I hope that they are provocative enough to fuel the discussion that we'll have tonight. Let me start the first point by quoting today's business section of the Globe and Mail. It says, "German economy strengthens amid Europe's gloom. The Eurozone is plunging into recession, but you wouldn't know that from Germany. Europe's biggest economy keeps getting bigger and, on Wednesday, reported enviable unemployment and retail sales numbers. Prices of its sovereign bonds continue to rise and exports are booming. Germany appears to be an island of good fortune in an expanding sea of misery. The rising exports apparently are rippling through the economy, insulating it somewhat from the debt crisis that is pushing unemployment up and growth down throughout Europe. In contrast, the German labor market is still improving. In November, seasonally adjusted unemployment dropped to 2.7 million, the lowest since 1991. That took the unemployment rate to 6.9%. Etc., etc. Okay, this goes on about many other things. This year, for the first time, the value of export is expected to breach 1 trillion euros, $1.4 trillion. The last time it got close to that figure was 2008. German exports are rising everywhere, including the European Union countries, which account for about 60% of its export trade." So that was the quote. Why am I quoting at this length? Well, if we look at the crisis, we tend to mostly look at the problems and not at those who, like the German export industries, are actually profiting from it. Of course, if you take a look at Greece, at Portugal, at Spain, the situation is indeed dramatically different. Unemployment in Spain, for example, is currently at 22.8%. Among youth, it's an incredible almost 50%. The gross domestic product in Greece is expected to be declining by more than 6% this year alone. This doesn't account for the last year, you know. To understand the left's response in Europe, however, we have to put this in context, and that means there are deep, very deep divisions and contradictions within the Eurozone. If you compare Germany to France, to Greece, France to Spain, the Netherlands to Italy or others, there's a lot of uneven development actually within a common currency zone. And for the time being, it appears that the German bourgeoisie has won. I don't want to be mistaken. The working class in Germany is facing serious problems too. But the overwhelming majority of gainfully employed workers is doing fairly well. And, what is even more important, is better off than they were last year. This means that there will be no single left answer to the global economic crisis in Europe. Even if the great differences between the parties and movements within the European left would not exist. So, from my point of view, the contradictions on the economic level actually make it difficult, to say the least, to come to a common response of the left. That would be my first point. I know, you know, this is not a stable situation. I won't dig into this more deeply, but on a general level, the economic differences are just huge, and therefore we don't find any sort of common response to the current crisis. My second point is that the left is facing a deep shift in power relations, and it has yet come to terms with its implications. Well, there are two major responses to the crisis so far. One is protesting the austerity policies that are put into place at great expense, in particular in Greece, Spain and Portugal. Especially Greece, which has been hit hardest, has seen a rise of a large protest movement and about a dozen general strikes so far. On the level of policies, however, this has hardly had any effect so far. And when Prime Minister Papandreou wanted to submit his government's austerity policies to a popular vote, he was out of office just 1 week later. This story of undoing democracy demonstrates another very important feature that we, the left, have to understand. We are still at a stage of national fights against an international financial regime. And this statement or conclusion has theoretical as well as important practical implications. How can the left score victories under these circumstances? Can there at all be victories within the confines of the nation state? I'm not going to answer the question. I'm just posing the question. Next speaker. Yeah. Number 3. Even in the countries that were hit hardest, where large protest movements have developed, not only in Greece, but also particularly in Spain, the majority of protesters may lean to the left, but this is not a consistent feature. To the contrary, if you look particularly at the recent elections in Portugal and Spain, representation in parliament, in fact, has shifted to the right instead. Of course, this has to do with the fact that the so-called socialist governments were in place in these countries. They were the one actually enacting the austerity policies. Of course, we all know that. But in any case, on election day, voters did not choose to vote for the parties to the left of government, but they overwhelmingly voted the right-wing parties back into power instead. And you all know there's nothing good to expect from them either. I suspect the same will happen soon in Greece, but that's another matter. Concerning Portugal and Spain, that's an empirical fact. And this demonstrates that despite the great protest movement, the populace has not shifted to the left, but in many cases, rather even further to the right. Which brings me to the fourth and last point that I wanted to make now. Oh, I'm perfectly timed. And that's our concepts, or rather the left's conceptual omissions. Are our political proposals attractive, in particular in times of a global economic crisis? Do we have something to offer to working people at this point of time? I would say economically we're good in terms of critique. For instance, this is what the left party in Germany does all the time. And it is a good and necessary thing. I don't want to be criticizing it. But is it enough? Is it enough to win over working people to our cause? I suspect not. Because as soon as it comes to so-called real politics, Realpolitik, many, and also the left party in Germany, more or less retreat to a basically Keynesian policy. So I do not want to denounce the left Keynesian approach altogether. It certainly has its place, but it also has major shortcomings. And it's, from my point of view, not really the socialist answer to a capitalist crisis. At least it's only part of it, let's put it that way. So I would ask the question, is it the conceptual framework of the left party or of the left in general? Do we have anything to offer that does not confine ourselves to protest on the one hand and to Keynesian politics on the others? I personally suspect there's a conceptual void leaving us politically vulnerable. Advocating a middle-of-the-road Keynesianism won't be enough. But at the same time, chanting revolution won't be enough either. So I conclude that I think we really need to work on theoretical and practical answers that help overcoming false choices. And we need to come up with answers that are attractive. Maybe not for 99% of the population, but certainly for more than 50%. Thanks.